Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. Today, which was May 15th of 2023, we had a huge incident for our little town. I found out some great demographic stuff about New Mexico, that there's about 46,600 or 400 people in Farmington, New Mexico. So our population shrank just a hair. But more specifically, I wanted to talk about, these incidents keep popping up. So an 18-year-old shooter, which it appears that, he executed this kill or prosecuted this shooting spree. He had some mental issues, and they were known, and he had access to some firearms. Now, this is where I've talked about mental health before, and we need to be very careful, how we deal with this, because if we give any inch of ground on the Second Amendment to those people, the left specifically, they'll take it. Case in point, our governor in New Mexico has already made a plea for more gun control already, using this tragedy, because if it bleeds, it leads. But this 18-year-old shot and killed 9 people, or injured 9 people and killed 3. There were 4 people killed in total. 1 was the shooter. I had been given false reports earlier in the day because I have a history with Aztec schools. There was an initial report that came out and said this was at Aztec High. And I left where my new business, my new fabrication facility, where I make new products, and went directly to AHS for 2 reasons. One, I hadn't had a chance to verify what was going on yet. 2, if it was at AHS, I was pretty sure that PD would have responded before I could get there, but because I have a history of knowing what I have to do in an incident like this, because I've sadly had to deal with it. I know what messages need to be sent out, when they need to be sent out, and how to set up a reunion center for kids. And that was my first thought, was how can I help with the former place that employed me for 13 years. Not because I was worried about anything else. This wasn't self-motivated. This was, I've been there. I know what to do. Unfortunately, this happened in Farmington, New Mexico. And it happened in a very, this is my hometown. This is New Mexico Black Rifle Operators' hometown. It has been for most of my life. I've lived in southern Colorado. I've lived a little bit in California, but mostly in New Mexico, in Farmington, most of my life. And unfortunately, this stuff is popping up, and crime has been popping up more and more in New Mexico, specifically in my little town. Now, they blocked off the area, which was on North Orchard in New Mexico, and that area around it, for a number of hours as they were processing the crime scene and making sure that this incident was taken care of. Now, I've been very critical of Farmington PD because of the incident where they, killed a homeowner, but in this case, they did the best they could. And I say that being as critical and harsh as I have been, I understand that in New Mexico, we have what we have for law enforcement, and there's always room for improvement. These guys were once my heroes. Today, they proved again that they are heroes. They ran towards gunfire. And in this incident, 2 police officers, one Farmington PD who was injured, was in stable condition and was released today, and one state PD who was hit, New Mexico State PD, and he self-rescued and drove himself to the hospital. Think about that. I don't know what the extent the injuries were, but they were able to take care of themselves, which leads to the next point that I wanted to bring. On screen is an IFAK. And I talk about self-defense often on this podcast, and how you need to be ready to defend yourself because you are your own first responder. Today's incident, I wonder how many people, or if any of them, could have been saved. if someone had the skill set and had this piece of equipment with them. This little kid has enough trauma stuff to stop a bleed for an individual or for a couple of individuals, depending upon their wounds, that could save their life before they get to the hospital. Now, I've heard this from many trainers, and I have myself have taken stop the bleed courses, and I've taken first aid courses because of the training regimen I've given myself. The idea is that if you have to put holes in someone, you have to be able to patch them. And this goes beyond just self-defense. This is that sheepdog mentality that I keep mentioning, that we have to take care of those in our hometown, in our circle. And this type of incident, if it's going to keep happening, and I think it will, and it's not a gun problem, it is a mental health problem. And it was actually stated in multiple articles that have come out in this incident that this gentleman, and I don't want to call him a gentleman, this 18-year-old shooter had multiple issues before and was suffering from mental health issues. Now, it goes without saying that if you have people in your home that are suffering from mental health issues, you need to keep firearms away from them. It's because giving them access to someone who's not mentally stable will either end up in their own death or someone else's death. This isn't a gun access problem, or this isn't a gun problem. This is the fact that we've locked down people for 3 years. We have encouraged people with social media to live in a fantasy world, and people can't deal with it. You see people checking out all the time. You see people not understanding the reality they're in, or that they're oppressed, and they want to get their pound of flesh out one way or another to get their story said or spoken. Or they want out, and they're willing to take out people to die by suicide by cop. Now, in this incident, listening to the radio, you have to understand when you listen to a scanner, a police scanner, and Police Chief Hebe, as much as I'm not a fan of him, he said it very eloquently today in his speech, and you can find it on Farmington PD's police Facebook, where he goes out and he speaks, and he's very tired, you can tell, because this is a draining thing. He said, in no short order, that Farmington PD responded. They did the best they could, and multiple agencies responded. This is typical of my area. If you cannot get resources to them fast enough yourself, the agencies around here will shift a power. Basically, they have a joint powers agreement that allows the neighboring communities or the San Juan County Sheriffs or New Mexico PD to get here to give them the resources they need to deal with an incident. Now, it goes without saying that I'm not a fan of media in general, and it proved itself again today because the media that I was getting, or the people that had read the media, were saying this was an Aztec. Again, having dealt with this stuff at Aztec High, it was my first instinct was to go towards this incident. After finding out where it was in Farmington and realizing that it was buttoned down and they were searching for making sure the area was secure. What I was talking about with real-time police calls coming in, there was a rumor that there were 2 shooters. Turns out there was only one. And the one shooter was engaged by multiple law enforcement agencies, and 2 got hit. There are rumors that there are other basic reports that are saying that there was a 4th officer, or a 3rd officer, or maybe a 4th officer hit during this. That hasn't been proven out, and I'm going off of what has been confirmed right now. And what has been confirmed is that there were 3 killed and 9 injured in this incident. And I pray for these people. My church has held a candlelight vigil for these people, for all that were affected today, the families of all the people that were affected today. I will not glorify a shooter because I know that's how they believe they're going to make their life worth something, is that they want that fame. Now, I don't know about this shooter because, honestly, they're keeping it kind of hush-hush because the incident's still evolving and they're still investigating more precisely. It's not evolving. There isn't more going on. This ended. Now, I've had friends who are from the area who are saying, well, I may have to cancel my trip to Farmington because of it doesn't seem like Farmington's very safe. I would tell you that it isn't just Farmington. It is everywhere. This isn't a small town. You have to understand, with our demographics of 46,000 people, this type of thing doesn't happen. This type of thing, in general, the type of crimes you see in San Juan County are property crimes where people steal stuff. And it's usually revolving around stealing stuff to get drugs, usually methamphetamines, now fentanyl. Now, the scourge of fentanyl's ravaging our country, and it's because we can't control our southern border. That stuff is permeable, meaning that you can just walk it across the border, and these aren't like your normal drugs. You can get 1,000 pills here, and it's enough to kill thousands of people. Fentanyl is a strong opioid that is, a synthetic opioid that I believe. But the Chinese have said, have basically been giving those chemicals or selling those chemicals to cartels in Mexico, and that stuff's coming across our borders. New Mexico is a border state. We've seen the scourge. I mean, I haven't personally, but I know that it's here. Again, I listen to police scanners all the time. And that's why it was weird having a lot of people. First, it was my son's mom, my kid's mother, who let me know what was going on. And initially, she had heard from someone in Albuquerque who had been reading media that this was at AHS, Aztec High School. That's not the case. This actually happened like I said, it was in Orchard and Dustin, that neighborhood, if you're familiar with New Mexico, Farmington, New Mexico specifically. That area is considered a very quiet place, but New Mexico, or Farmington, is becoming a very active place with crime. And we have to ask ourselves what the problem is. What has changed in the last few months or the last few years to start seeing this stuff here? The AR-15, which I did find out from Chief Hebe that one of those was used in this incident. It isn't because of that rifle's existence and its accessibility. The fact is that rifle's around 60 years old, 65 years old now, and it's been around. And there was a point before Reagan was in office, you could buy a machine gun over the counter. You could buy a fully automatic M16, what the military actually had. Nowadays, you can't. Again, this isn't a gun problem. This is a mental health problem. We have to look hard. And in the last 3 years, we've had the COVID lockdowns where kids were locked up, pushed in their own little bubble. And we have to look at the algorithms of social media of what the hell is happening to our kids. We have to look at why aren't we giving them a hug or actually discussing mental health and seeing what the actual problems are. Instead, we have a group of people that are very focused on the gun. If this had been a drive where the guy had used a vehicle instead of a gun, why wouldn't we be talking about banning all automobiles? It's because it's untenable. And for a lot of people in the 2A, myself included, banning the AR-15 or banning the most useful tool to fight something like this is asinine. There is absolutely no reason to ban the tool, but we need to look deeper at those reasons why this keeps happening. What have we done to our young adults, our young kids, that they think this is an acceptable means to cry out for help or to express anger and discontent with whatever's going on? So I'm begging you that as you train, to be ready, because this incident also raises that self-awareness and that self-rescue to that ultimate level that you need to be ready to defend yourself. And whether you agree with my politics or not, you have to look at the realities on the ground, as they say it in military parlances. The reality on the ground is that whether you choose to have a firearm or not is irrelevant. The bad guy will. Whether you choose to engage the bad guy or not, the bad guy will. So what are you going to do to change your mindset? And even at that, if you do manage to get away from this and to be safe, how are you helping those around you? Are you helping those around you? I mentioned it last night about being a good witness or being an active participant. Which are you? In this case, I honestly know that had I had been in the area, just based off the response, my initial response, I probably would have been either engaging the guy or I would have been trying to help those that were down. And that's what we need to do as sheepdogs in our society. We can listen to the platitudes and people saying, you need to get rid of this, because that isn't a solution. The fact is, these exist. The fact is that 3D printers exist. There is no way you're going to put this genie back in the bottle. So how are you going to deal with it? The same goes for social media. We cannot undo social media. There is no banning that is going to stop people from living in their own little brainwashed echo chamber bubble where they think that getting their pound of flesh is somehow going to make their situation better. So what do we do to fix it? I'm all ears. Because after 2017, when this incident happened in Aztec High, I did a lot of soul searching. I did a lot of fact checking. And what it turns out is the only solution I could come up with is stay strapped or get clapped and train up and be ready. Because these guys, these shooters, live in their own world and only pop up when they're ready to take action. And the only recourse you really have is either expect kindness from these individuals or be willing to deal with them. And this goes back to the stuff I talked about with David Penny this morning when I was talking about the last podcast where I said the right of self-defense is universal. You know, I pray for these people that died. They didn't have to die. The fact is, these people, those poor people, had a chance to defend themselves. Maybe they didn't. Maybe this guy caught them and surprised them. Maybe that was the incident that saved everyone else. But those other people that were injured, what could they have done to help themselves and to help their community? Now, I'm sure that you're going to hear people say, hey, we need to ban these guns again. When our governor's already calling for this, you can already expect that it's going to be another fight in the roundhouse the next session because she's spoiling for it. They're going to use incidents like this because it bleeds and it pulls at the heartstrings. And that happened to me on December 7th, 2017, where I was actually very open to what could we do gun-wise, gun control-wise, to stop this from ever happening. First off, the shooting in Aztec, person used a pistol. This individual used 3 different weapons. So the question has to now come, how did they get them? This was a person who was an adult. I'm guessing they passed background checks and were able to purchase them themselves. So universal background checks, because we have them in New Mexico, didn't stop this. Red flag laws, we have them in New Mexico. It didn't stop this. Gun bans wouldn't have stopped this either, because he probably already had them before the gun ban would have even went into effect. We have 450, I think is what I've heard last time. I had to think about the number. Million guns in the world, in not in New Mexico, in the United States. And there's only 350 million United States citizens. So what are we going to do? You're not going to get rid of 400 million guns. That's not possible. Even if you went door to door, you would cause more violence by doing that than just simply addressing the problem, which is mental health. Like, share, subscribe. Be great.